Welcome to ELD's Time Vault Games. These are all the black cards from Strixhaven. Kicking things off is Arrogant Poet at 2 mana for a 2/1 human warlock. When he attacks, you can pay 2 life. If you do, it gains flying until end of turn. And this seems like a solid pick for me. Not necessarily draft order pick, but as far as your pre-release pool, you're going to be happy to have this as a early beater that can potentially, in the end game, jump into the air and do those final 2, 4, 6 points of damage. That seems totally fine to me based off of what I've seen of the set so far. Most of these I'm seeing for the first time, so my opinion may be different by the time I'm done with all of this, but so far, generally you want to have that curve start at 2 with your creatures and be able to contest the board. Doesn't seem like that part of Magic is going to be changing anytime soon. Baleful Mastery, 4 mana instant. However, you can pay only 2 if you prefer. If the 2 is paid, your opponent draws a card, and you're going to exile a creature or planeswalker. So at 4 mana, exile a creature or planeswalker, you'll take it. I mean, at 2 mana, your opponent drawing a card, that feels bad. So that's, I mean, it feels like either mode here is bad, but you've got some versatility. The 4 mana is just a little more mana than you want to spend, but it does actually get a planeswalker out of there, which is nice. It's just, in general, you can clear planeswalkers just by being ahead on board very often, though they do go on to win the game sometimes when left unchecked. So a little bit of a tough card to evaluate. Doesn't really matter. If you're playing black, you're going to play this card just because it says exile a creature on it. I mean, even if it costs 5 mana, you'd play it. But the best ones, you know, at 2 and 3 mana, those type of removal spells, much, much better. Brackish Trudge, 3 mana, 4/2. That's some power for only 3 mana. Enter the battlefield tapped, and you can pay 2 to return it from your graveyard to your hand. Activate only if you've gained life this turn. I like this guy. I mean, he does trade down very often with that tiny backside, so your opponent's 2 mana creatures are going to trade into him. However, you're going to be able to get him back if you have any type of life gain in the deck, which we'll see if that's a common occurrence. Lifelink, of course, the first thing that comes to mind for that. Looks like this card actually allows for some life gain as well. When it enters the battlefield, you choose one. You can get a 1/1 black and green pest, which has, when this creature dies, you gain a life, or you draw a card and lose a life, or exile target player's graveyard. So you can ETB, exile a graveyard, cantrip, or create a 1/1. I mean, that feels like a constructed quality card for like standard, being able to get 3 power on board for 3 with a little bit of an upside, and also having the versatility to draw cards. I wouldn't be surprised if that ends up seeing some standard play. And, you know, for vampire decks, maybe they're going to be happy to have that extra card draw as well, the Phyrexian Rager effect. So I'd say commander, vampire decks are going to play that. As far as playing it in limited, yeah, you're going to play that in limited. Confront the Past, X and a black. We've got that scene of Gideon sacrificing himself to save Liliana, who is perhaps hiding out at Strixhaven here as Professor Onyx. We don't know. I don't know the full story yet. Perhaps that's already been revealed online. You're going to choose one. Return target planeswalker card with a mana value X or less from your graveyard to the battlefield, or remove twice X loyalty counters from a target planeswalker an opponent controls. So you're basically going to KO an opponent's planeswalker or return a planeswalker from the graveyard to the battlefield. Doesn't feel like the type of thing you're going to be able to manage in limited, but you know, if you're playing black, you can toss that in your sideboard, and if your learn cards give you a blowout play of getting your planeswalker back, you're not going to be complaining. There's not much of a cost to having cards in your sideboard and limited. So Crushing Disappointment, 4 mana instant. Each player loses 2 life. You draw 2 cards. It's an interesting card. Yeah, each player losing 2 and you drawing 2. I mean, that seems fine for a variety of decks. Not the type of thing I want to be doing in limited, mostly just because I don't want to be spending my mana to draw cards and not impact the board. My typical strategy for limited is not going to revolve around playing instants or sorceries that don't actually affect the board. You know, it's not like you're drawing toward a combo or something. Like, you really need to be putting in the continual improvement to your board position, and taking off turn 4 to do something like this is not going to cut it. Essence Infusion, 2 mana, sorcery. Put 2 +1/+1 counters on target creature. It gains lifelink until end of turn. I mean, that's a pretty big bonus for 2 mana. And a pretty significant swing with the lifelink. I mean, that could be incredibly difficult to contend with in the early game. Of course, the thing that you're concerned about with cards like this is the fact that if your opponent has removal, when they remove that creature, they get a 2-for-1. So this is tempting in that it's only 2 mana, and it pumps up the creature permanently. And the lifelink boost also, helps out. You throw that on like a 2/2 creature, and then you have a 4/4. You gain the 4 life. I mean, that's actually going to be pretty difficult to catch up with. So very interesting. It'll depend on the quality of the removal as far as what type of risk you're taking here. But as far as the reward goes, that's a pretty solid reward. Eye Twitch. A eye bat. So there's a new eye. All right. Somebody was actually working on Eye Tribal the other day. They got Evil Eye of Ormsby-Gore. So 1 mana, 1/1 flyer. When Eye Witch dies, you learn. So, new cards for Eye Tribal. Flunk, 1 in a black. Target creature gets -X/-X until end of turn, where X is 7 minus the number of cards in that creature's controller's hand. So, if they have full grip, it does nothing. If they have 0 cards in hand, it's -7/-7 for 1. But I'm trying to gauge if that's even like playable in limited. It's close. I mean, removal is the absolute pinnacle. The fact that this is sometimes just garbage kind of hurts, but it is only 2 mana. I like that they print cards like this because they're not immediately easy to evaluate. I would suspect that this is typically going to give at least -2/-2 to -4/-4 in a typical game. So when looking at it through that lens, it's like decent, balanced by the fact that it's pretty cheap. I mean, I'd probably be much happier with like a Defile, which would be -X/-X, where it's the number of swamps, or the other one that's just a straight up -2 guaranteed. Maybe Defile is that one. Anyways, there's certainly been better removal, but that doesn't really matter for this context because we're talking about playing in a pre-release, so you got to play with what you got. Maybe this makes the cut in terms of trying to make ends meet with your removal, but it is not the best piece of removal we've seen by any stretch. Go blank. Target player discards 2 cards, then exile all cards from that player's graveyard. Just taking a moment on the art. I actually appreciate that art quite a bit. It's really nice. So discard, again, not generally where you want to be in limited. There are times where it has been good. Keep in mind, when you're hitting your opponent's last 2 good cards, something like this can be really devastating in a kind of low-to-the-ground, fast-paced format. I'm not quite getting the feel that that's what this is going to be. The other side of that is, a lot of the time your opponent ends up being hellbent in games of limited, especially if there's not any type of bulk card advantage. You're just throwing everything at the board as fast as you can. So, and then of course, there's the possibility of your opponent holding on to lands. If discard is a prevalent thing in the format, they can easily play around that by trying to hold on to lands and have a lower mana curve. So, yeah, in general, not actually what I want to be doing in a pre-release, but it's not like they were going to give us Chain of Smog in this set. Hunt for Specimens, 1 in a black sorcery. Create a 1/1 pest and learn. So the pests are black and green, and you can, when they die, you gain a life. Create some triggers. So, yeah, probably not where I want to be. Paying 2 mana for a 1/1, even with the learn. A Lash of Malice. Target creature gets +2/-2 until end of turn. Yeah, I think I probably like this one more by quite a bit than that previous one. Not only can this kill all of the smaller creatures, it can also push through extra damage toward the end of the game, potentially making your 4/4 do an extra 2 damage. Leech Fanatic. That can also take like a 3/3 and make it trade way up. Leech Fanatic. As long as it's your turn, Leech Fanatic has Lifelink. Yeah. See, that's fine. That's great. 2/2 Lifelink for 2. All right. I'm on board. Turning that guy sideways is going to be great in the early turns. Mage Hunter. 4 casting cost, 3/4. Whenever an opponent casts or copies an instant or sorcery, they lose a life. That's probably going to see some play in Commander, though that mana cost, not going to make it super scary, but it does have that kind of mini Campbell effect. There's I think that's its name, from Kaltime, the one that whenever your opponent plays an instant or sorcery, they lose 2, you gain 2. It's like a watered down version of that. But people that are looking to tax instants and sorceries get another tool in their toolbox there. Mage Hunter's Onslaught. Destroy target creature or planeswalker. Whenever a creature blocks this turn, its controller loses 1 life. That's a spicy card. So you're going to be able to play that, blow out their best blocker or just their best creature overall, and then punish any type of blocks that might happen as well. So that's a card that I would much rather have this than the 2 mana conditional spell that we talked about previously. This one actually kills the creature or planeswalker, and the fact that it gives you that breakthrough effect is pretty vicious. Necrotic Fumes, 3 mana. As an additional cost to cast this spell, exile a creature you control, exile target creature or planeswalker. So like an overcosted Spark Harvest, where you're losing a creature and they're losing a creature. In the past, this has been a 1 mana effect. Here, because it's a lesson, we're looking at 3 mana. Novice Dissector. 4 mana, 3/3. Pay 1, sack a creature, another creature, to put a +1/+1 counter on target creature, and you can only do that as a sorcery. They really hamstring you with this one. It's not a card you're going to be embarrassed to play, but not really great compared to what it could be if the sorcery clause wasn't on there, if you didn't have to pay 1 to sacrifice the creature. I mean, this is something that can convert kind of less valuable creatures into a real bonus for a creature with evasion. So to that end, if you're playing black, I wouldn't be surprised that you're sleeving this up, but it's not something that you're going to set out to look to abuse for your pre-release pool. Orik Lore Mage. 2 and 2 black for a 3/3. You can tap to search your library for a card, put it into your graveyard, then shuffle. If it's an instant or sorcery, you put a +1/+1 counter on Orik. So definitely expect to see this in Commander. You can set up all sorts of combos with this. I mean, flashback spells, putting creatures in for an Entomb effect, putting Worldgorger Dragon into your graveyard, or, well, not Gristlebrand in Commander, but Jin-Gitaxias, anything that you're actually looking to put into the bin, and then also being able to grab a flashback spell like Unburial Rites. I mean, people are going to have fun with that in Commander. Plumb the Forbidden. 2 mana instant. Is an additional cost. You can sack 1 or more creatures. When you do, copy the spell for each creature sacked this way. Draw a card and lose a life. Very interesting. If that was a common, I would actually have to contemplate that for Zubera Storm. Wouldn't be good enough, but that is an interesting card. Just the 2 mana does kind of hurt it. Yeah, that's really interesting. Great response to any type of board sweeper. And man, if damage still went on the stack, I would love this card. Just stack up a bunch of stuff that's going to trade and then end up drawing 3 or 4 cards. Whew, that would be spicy for only 2 mana. Still potentially fine. Poet's Quill. Also some combo potential for different type of decks. Poet's Quill. 2 mana, equipment. When it enters the battlefield, you learn, and the equipped creature has +1/+1 in lifelink. And I'm glad that's a rare. So this is the type of card that you can lose when a child is playing it against you. Giving a creature a bonus and lifelink can be really brutal, and I suspect that this card will turn a lot of games directly around. I mean, if you're just throwing this on like a 4/4 and all of a sudden you have like a 5/5 lifelink and you're just turning stuff sideways, that's just brutal. It's only 2 mana to equip it, so you can actually pass this back and forth in between an attacker and a blocker. And this one seems pretty fierce for a limited pool, and the fact that you get the lesson out of it as well, I would be very pleased to be playing that. That is actually the type of card that I would consider going black for. Usually, so cards like Armadillo Cloak are often good enough to just beat you, just because you're getting a buff and the lifelink. Now, the problem with those cards is, they lose the creature, they lose the enchantment. Here, this is an equipment, so this is more along the lines of Loxodon Warhammer, which I'm not going to lie, like I've seen Pro Tour players get just domed by like 12-year-olds with that card, and there was nothing they could do. So not quite as much as the +3/+0, but I mean, this is a card that I suspect to probably be better than a lot of people would expect. Professor Onyx, there she is. We saw her early in spoiler season, and that really got everybody excited about this set, spoiling this Magecraft. So she's got a tacked on Tendrils of Agony, so that's definitely something. And then the rest of her abilities for a 6-mana Planeswalker. So Liliana's abilities here: +1, you lose a life, you look at the top 3 of your library, put 1 into your hand and the rest into your graveyard. -3, each opponent sacks a creature with the greatest power among creatures they control. And -8, each opponent may discard a card. If they don't, they lose 3 life. Repeat this process 6 more times. That is a interesting ultimate. Probably doesn't do what you actually want it to, as your opponent's going to either choose to lose life or to discard the cards. In a game of Commander, your opponent's just going to lose 18 life, which is not super amazing for a Planeswalker ultimate. Typically, they just win the game. I suppose I'd probably prefer to be each opponent discards a card, and then if they don't, instead of the may, that way you definitely mind wipe everybody, or mind twist everybody. But giving your opponent choices generally doesn't work out super well for you. If your opponents are competent, they'll make the best choice, and that's not going to be ideal for you. But fun card. I like a lot about it. Like, her hand kind of leaving the frame of the card and everything. It's a sharp-looking card, and it's nice to see Liliana back. Professor's Warning: choose 1, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature, or target creature gains indestructible until end of turn at 1 mana. I actually like this type of combat trick quite a bit. It's only 1 mana, which is a criteria for me to kind of really value a combat trick. 1 mana tends to just be a lot better, and you can kind of slot that in much more easily. Both modes here are totally fine as well. Promising Dusk Mage, 3 mana for a 2/3. Whenever it dies, if it had +1/+1 counter on it, draw a card. Not necessarily the easiest thing from what we've seen so far, but certainly within the realm of possibilities. And if this creature is dying and drawing a card, that's certainly a way to get ahead in terms of card advantage. When you're trading card for card, whoever has the most cards tends to win. Menace on this one: Sedgemoor Witch at 3 mana, 3 power, and ward pay 3 life. Interesting. So your opponent has to pay 3 life in order to effectively target this with a spell or ability. And the Magecraft is going to be getting a 1/1 Pest. So going to get a whole lot of bodies there. And when those die, you gain a life. So yeah, you're definitely going to play this in your limited pool. It's a 3/2 with Menace. A little difficult, a little painful to try and remove it. And you basically have another, it's like a young Pyromancer tacked on here. I mean, what's not to like? This card's actually, I think, very, very interesting. I mean, thinking of whether or not that's even possible, we might see that in Legacy with Chain of Smog, just making infinite bodies in a pox shell. I mean, it's a combo card now, guys. Chain of Smog. I mean, you can go infinite with Magecraft unless they do some type of errata, which I'd be strongly against. I don't think we should be making power level errata, especially not on a garbage Magic card. Spectre of the Fenz, 4 mana, 2/3 flyer. You can pay 6 to make an opponent lose 2 life and you gain 2 life. And yeah, that's kind of a workhorse card. Not really aggressively costed. It's kind of fine. I mean, at 4 mana, you really want to have more power in the air, but you're not embarrassed to sleeve this up. And the fact that you can have a quasi fire breathing effect on here that you don't even have to attack with is pretty nice. You have inevitability on your board, on your side of the board when this is out each turn. If you can create a standstill, you can just start having that life swing going probably just once per turn. You're probably not getting to 12 mana. All right. And of course, if you have infinite mana, then that's just another way of killing a whole table. Tenured Inkcaster, 5 casting cost, 2/2. When it enters the battlefield, put a +1/+1 counter on a creature. And when a creature you control with a +1/+1 counter attacks, each opponent loses a life and you gain a life. So you only gain 1 life. You don't drain everybody. But there's a lot of commander decks, particularly vampires, that may find room, though those lists are pretty tight. There's a lot of good vampires already to contend with. Umbral Juke. Interesting. I guess they have some type of Quidditch variant here. In this world, an instant, target player sacrifices a creature or planeswalker, or create a 2/1 flyer for 3 mana. I like this card a lot actually. Depending on the prevalence of token creatures, very often you're going to get something decent with an edict effect, and being able to create a body makes this so it's not actually dead. And I'd be very, very likely to sleeve this one up in my pool. That's almost a certainty. Tough to imagine. I mean, we're almost done with black. There's not a whole lot of cards that are better than that, especially at uncommon. Unwilling Ingredient. We've got this 1/1 frog. Poor thing has menace, and you can pay 3 and exile it from your graveyard to draw a card and lose a life. So giving some card drawing out of the graveyard. I mean, Eternal formats will probably keep an eye out for this type of thing. If you're going to be milling yourself, maybe there's some way of taking advantage of this. There's not a lot of flashback card draw. And even the limited amounts that we have, people have found ways to make use of. I don't anticipate that being the case here because the front of the card is so weak, just the 1/1 body. But anytime that you have draw a card on something, keep an eye out for it. It's possible it'll end up in some type of weird combo that you didn't see coming. And that is all for black. Be sure to check out the rest of these videos to be informed for the pre-release. That is all for this one, but don't worry, there is a lot more. You can check out our older videos, and we're always putting out new videos from ELD's Time Vault Games in Bellingham, Massachusetts. If you want to help the channel, of course, you can like, subscribe, share, tap that notification bell so you can know the next time our new videos come out. Thanks for watching.